Awesome, awesome. A few of you seem to have had fun. That is good to hear. The time has changed. We are now getting an extra hour of sleep of sorts, and now dealing with the darkness a lot earlier in the day. So for today's icebreaker, we'll talk a little bit about that. What do you like or dislike about the time change? For myself, I just mentioned it. I do like that we get that extra hour. But I don't think I'm a fan of how dark it gets so early. So I'll leave it at that and I'll hand it to you, Chase.
I would have to agree. I don't like how dark it gets right now, but I will say, like waking up early because I do wake up early for like class and work. Like it's definitely nicer waking up around like 6 or a little bit before when like the sun's out.
Indeed, indeed. Williams?
Uh, I have to agree with Chase. Since I'm up early, like at 6 a.m., it's kind of nice that the sun's already out.
Yeah, you gotta like that. Carla, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. It's easier to wake up in the morning. At I wake up at 6 a.m. as well. It felt more natural. But it's like I'm tired already. It's like 7.
Right. Because at the end of the day, you're like, "Ugh, this day's still going." Um, but yeah, let's go to you, May.
I kind of like it dark at the same time because it gets cooler quicker, and it's been hot, so I appreciate that.
Indeed, indeed. Sweater weather is about to be here or is here. I think for us Californians, anything below what 75, 70 degrees, it's time to put on some layers. Let's go to you, Abdul.
I guess I'm kind of like neutral with how dark it gets. Like, yeah, sure, it'll be like, oh, I wish there was a little more sunlight, but then I also like how cold it is at night too. So yeah.
I see Patty responded in the chat. I don't like how dark it gets either. I feel like we have been robbed from the end of the day. Yes, yes. It's like, could I even be outside? I know back in the day we had to come in when the street lights came on, right? So the summertime was awesome because it didn't get dark until like 8 o'clock. So you're outside a lot longer. But in the fall, you have to deal with these short evening nights. Um, Melissa responded in the chat as well. Easy to wake up in the morning, but it usually takes me a week or two to adjust to it feeling so late. Yes, agreed. It is an adjustment. Who has the blackout curtains? Who's not getting up that early in the morning? It's like, hey, let's keep this sun out. Okay, Maya, you want to go ahead and jump in there and share?
Yeah, I've never been a morning person, and for some reason I like it when it's dark when I wake up. It's easier for me to adjust, I guess. Um, and I don't like that it's getting dark earlier, but I do, I guess, find myself being more productive in the evening when it's darker earlier. So that's kind of a good thing, I guess.
Okay, productivity, that's good. Um, Issy, do you want to jump in there? We're sharing for those that just joined, we're sharing about whether we like the time change, how it gets brighter in the morning earlier, and then it's getting a little darker earlier in the evening.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with what everybody's been saying. I generally like my family will get together more when it gets dark earlier and like cook dinners. So that's one thing that I like about daylight savings.
Indeed, indeed. Let's go to you, Jamie.
I agree with what Maya said. I feel like I work better in the night. So now that it gets darker earlier, I feel like I'm more productive.
So we got some folks that like the darkness. That's good. Let's go to what Patty has shared. Um, Rebecca.
Hi, yeah, I feel like maybe with it getting darker earlier, I go to bed earlier, which means that waking up is easier. I'm not a morning person, so I think maybe going to bed earlier means I am better at waking up in the morning.
Indeed, indeed. Manuel.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. It's kind of like half and half. Um, I'd say I like it sometimes because it gets like dark earlier. So it's like sometimes I feel like um I don't know, like the day is over. So I kind of finish up my things a little faster. And then just kind of like say for the rest of the afternoon, I just kind of relax more. So it helps in there. But then I also don't like it exactly for that reason because I feel like the day ends like at 5:30 to 6. And so I just start like slacking off on a ton of work because I'm like, oh, the day is over. It's nighttime already. And I'm like, wait, it's barely 6. So it
The
kind of
time will start winding
frustrates,
down.
yeah, it kind of frustrates me a little bit on that. But I would say like half and half. Sometimes I like it. And then sometimes it's just some days I'm just like, come on. I work better when it's like more like there's more light. So, but yeah, I'd say like half.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Madison, you want to jump in there? It's definitely just having the extra sleep for sure. Even though it's just an hour, I feel more rested. Agreed. Feeling rested is good. And so I'm team extra hour. Jorge, you want to jump in there and bring us home and let us know how you're feeling about the time change? You might be on mute or responding in the chat. But while you're figuring that out, we'll go ahead and jump into the lecture. What we'll be doing today is really just starting where we left off last week. We didn't get a chance to complete the Bhatna Wadna activities, so I want to revisit those, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at this really awesome TED Talk with Heather McGee and answer some questions from there. And then we'll talk through some of the narrative strategy questions just so that we can start thinking about how you're developing your narratives in relation to your projects. And so, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to go ahead and rewatch the Bhatna Wadna video, and then we'll go ahead and introduce the activities that you all will complete today. Let's see. That the sound is working. Sure sound.
Do you want to be a stronger, more collaborative and successful negotiator? Then you need to know about BATNAs and WATNAs. BATNAs and WATNAs help you maximise the strength of your bargaining position. They're used to make sure you don't put all your cakes in one basket. and that you have a strong backup plan during negotiation. I'm Eleanor Shakiba, author of Difficult People Made Easy. In this video, I'll explain what BATNAs and WATNAs are. I'll help you to get a grip on how to identify them in hands-on situations, and I'll tell you how to use them to sound like a truly masterful negotiator. Meet Angie. Next week she's going to an important business meeting. Her own business is expanding rapidly, and this means she needs larger premises. Next Monday, she's negotiating a deal on her dream building. This shop has everything Angie needs, but there's a problem. The rent is 10% higher than what she can afford to pay. Angie's plan is to negotiate and bring that rent down. Angie is a smart operator, so she's doing lots of preparation for her meeting. She and Roberto have already worked out a negotiation strategy. This outlines all the tactics Angie can use to persuade the landlord to give her a good deal. But they haven't stopped there. Today they're planning what Angie will do if the deal falls through. They're preparing a BATNA and a WATNA. BATNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. WATNA is the opposite to BATNA. It stands for Worst Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. Knowing her BATNA and WATNA will help Angie negotiate from a very strong position because it'll help her build a backup plan. Here's how Angie and Roberto work out their BATNA. They start by recapping all the options they can propose during the negotiation. These are options that fall within the frame of a negotiated agreement. They include options which promote Angela as a stable tenant and a few sweeteners to get the landlord on side. Next, Angie and Roberto brainstorm the alternatives which exist outside the frame of the negotiated agreement. These are possible options for action if the deal falls through, the alternatives which Angie will draw on to identify her BATNA. Once they've thought of as many alternatives as they possibly can, Angie and Roberto circle the most attractive option outside the box. This is their best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or their BATNA. Now they're ready to work out their WATNA. They do this by circling the least attractive option outside the box. This is their worst alternative to a negotiated agreement, or their WATNA. Now Angie knows her worst case scenario. If she can't get a good deal with this landlord, and she can't find other alternative premises, she may have to downsize her business. But that's not very likely to happen. So her WATNA is not a big threat to Angie's business. Meanwhile, Angie's BATNA is reasonably attractive. If she can't get a suitable deal on this shop, she'll find another one and negotiate a reasonable rent on that one. Knowing this means that Angie can take action now to boost her power in next week's negotiation. She sends Roberto on a road trip. His job is to find other shops they can rent if Angie's dream deal falls through. Meanwhile, Angie starts calling business owners who might want to share her dream premises with her. This means that even if Roberto's trip is fruitless, Angie will still have a viable backup plan. So today's the big day. Angie's bargaining power is vastly increased by the strength of her BATNA. She's able to stay calm, even when the landlord resorts to aggressive tactics, because she's got a strong fallback position. She holds firm and refuses to budge on the rent. Then she offers an irresistible concession, and the landlord rethinks his position. Angie gets the deal she wants because she's used her BATNA and her WATNA in combination with a great negotiating strategy. She's taken 5 steps to do this. Step 1. List your options inside the frame of an agreement. Step 2. List your options outside the frame of an agreement. Step 3. Choose your best alternative outside of the agreement. Step 4. Identify your worst alternative outside of the agreement. Step 5. Act to boost your BATNA. And remember, if you want to be a better negotiator, don't put all your cakes in one basket. I'm Eleanor Shakiba, and I wish you sweet success in your next negotiation.
All right, so BOTNA, we know it stands for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. This occurs when everything on your wish list is obtained. It is important to know that what your BOTNA is before your negotiation begins. Um, Again, WATNA is the opposite of that, which is the worst alternative to negotiated agreement. This occurs when nothing in your wish list is obtained. Most negotiations result in outcomes between a BOTNA and a WATNA. So what I want you all to do for this class activity is to think of your studio project and a potential conflict or issue that is coming up with one of your stakeholder groups. This could be the local government in relation to the building and safety. This could be the community in relation to, a narrative component or an issue with another stakeholder. It can be any of the stakeholders that you identify. What you want to do is identify your best alternative to a negotiated agreement in context of your conflict that you've identified and what the worst alternative could be. Up into finding a new site, right? So just thinking of all of the potential outcomes in relation to your BOTNA and the WATNA and identifying at least one. And then you want to identify the values that you wish to uphold in context of your best alternative. What are you trying to accomplish, right? In context of your values, because your values can be accomplished, let's say, if your BOTNA isn't actually achieved, and maybe there's some concessions you can make within that, right? As long as your values are strong and represented in there. So really want to identify what that is. So also you want to identify what your interests are, right? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve a habitat for local flora and fauna? Are you trying to achieve economic opportunity? Really looking at, what we've been discussing in regards to social determinants of health. And oftentimes, building alignment across the social determinants of health can create alignment across stakeholder groups. You could find agreement with businesses who may want to have economic opportunity if you generate that opportunity on site. You may have agreement with local government if you can identify how your programs on the site relate to its efforts across its policy agendas, right? So really trying to figure out where your interests are and what you're trying to achieve as outcomes, and really, again, trying to figure out how those interests can align to, let's say, the stakeholder group that you're having the most challenges with. So we'll do this activity. Again, you can create a Word document and use these headers, or you can screenshot this and enter it as a PDF. Whichever you prefer to do, feel free to do so. But we'll take about 15 minutes to go through this activity, and then we'll come back and debrief and share out. All right. Does anyone have any questions regarding this activity? All right, so let's go ahead and take the time to go through this exercise. Again, we'll come back in about 15 minutes. Thumbs up if you need more time. Thumbs up if you need more time. All right, we'll give a couple of minutes for folks to start wrapping it up. We'll come back in about another minute or two. All right, all right. So let's go ahead and have folks start sharing out. Do we have any volunteers that want to start?
I can jump in.
Awesome.
So in our studio, we're designing arthropod friendly gardens at different sites around the Pomona Valley. And part of this was creating like a certification program so that people with existing gardens can have an arthropod friendly certified garden to increase awareness for arthropods and our community partner, Clean and Green Pomona. And so an issue that I identified was that there's not enough support from the Cal Poly Pomona studio and or our community partner to establish longevity in the certification program. And so our BATNA might be that our studio helps our community partner, Clean and Green Pomona, apply for a grant to cover the administrative costs to establish the certification program. And our WATNA might be that we complete the certification outline and don't follow up with the project. Once the studio's over, we just hand everything over to our partners and are unable to continue the program. Some values I identified were, the project is pro arthropod, pro native plants, education, and increasing access to public green space for residents in the Pomona Valley. Interests of the project are creating gardens and public space to increase small patch habitat for native insects and access for census tracts identified in our priority index, promote biodiversity and support the food chain, connect Pomona Valley residents with their local ecosystem, native insects and plants that support wildlife populations, and increasing awareness of arthropods.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for jumping in there. That was a really great explanation in regards to your BATNA. WATNA, when we're thinking about WATNA, that was really a great example as well. We really want to think about what we will walk away from the table from, right? What is unacceptable. And I know sometimes with these projects, what you said is just exactly what happens, right? It's a project that you do a really great go around at for the semester. You provide it to a community partner, it doesn't really go anywhere, right? So that is frustrating to see. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, issue. Who else wants to jump in there?
I can go. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm in the same studio with Izzy. Um, but I chose to focus on the conflict and issue of continued use of pesticides and maintenance practices, because that can inhibit the arthropods. Um, and so the BATNA would be to no longer utilize pesticides and maintenance practices. And the WATNA would be the continued use of pesticides without any change. And these spaces are either like at homes or in public spaces. Um, so for both of those situations, as far as values, um, a healthy environment and ecosystem equals healthy people and community spaces. So it impacts social determinants of health. And then more habitat space means an ecosystem has the possibility to function better. And then also using the program or site design as a method to create space for community involvement, participation, and education. And then as far as interests, it would be finding methods to provide maintenance that does not include the use of pesticides, um, finding methods to increase the amount of arthropods on a site, which would increase an important food source for birds and other animals, and just the use of plants native to plant communities in the region will create a better habitat.
Awesome, awesome. That was really a great breakdown. And that Watna really again is greatly expressed in regards to identifying what you'll walk away from and really expressing that in regards to the use of pesticides is powerful, right? So really in influencing the change in that practice and coming up with alternative methods that really make it easier for the anthropod population that you're mentioning to thrive, right? And so those are really, really great examples. Really like the values that you highlighted as well. So really, again, these frameworks and understanding again allow you to uh, prioritize how you implement some of these components into your program design, how you navigate some of these conversations with the different partners and bring up different issues that are at stake. And again, use your expertise as a landscaper to introduce alternative opportunities. And I really like the way that you infuse the role of community. Issy also brought that up, and that's powerful, right? In encouraging the engagement of community, not only in the decision making, but also in the efforts to maintain the site. So that's powerful. Thanks for sharing, Rebecca. Do you have any other volunteers? You want to jump in there, Chase?
Yeah, I could share mine. So for my conflict or issue that I put for my studio project was people within the community like stealing copper wires for like street lighting and also pedestrian lighting. So a BATNA for this would be to work on better designs to help limit the number of wires being cut and stolen to help improve the safety of the area. Just because when they're cutting these wires, it doesn't provide electricity for these lights and decreases the safety in an area. WADNA, I just put not fixing the issue at all. Just continuing like letting it be. Values for this, I put safety and accessibility as my two major points, as these are key issues that obviously pedestrian and street lighting help to tackle. An interest would be just to help make the community feel safer by allowing there to be light and limit the amount of blind spots in the area, because that could be a potential hazard for families who want to walk at night, who work long day shifts, or also just need to go in and out of their house.
No, this is a really good one. And is a very much so big issue in some cities and municipalities in our region. I know in the city of LA, the Sixth Street Bridge, which recently got rebuilt, right, had a lot of lighting there. Um, and it was very beautifully uh, introduced to the city. Folks were using it. The lights were beautiful. I know even within my department, we lit up the lights for our different initiatives, like our LA is for Everyone campaign. It's a beautiful campaign that honors the city and its diversity through this beautiful, colorful display. That we were able to light up the Sixth Street Bridge and different other areas of the city, which includes the Port of LA. Um, but we can't do that anymore, right? Because folks came and stole that copper lining out of the lights up on the Sixth Street Bridge. So these things are real issues that are happening, right? And better product design, better design will definitely support that, right? Um, and then there's also other alternatives too, like economic opportunity, creating better opportunities for workforce development, working with people maybe even experiencing homelessness or the reentry population, and transitional age youth, especially in communities that are, living under the poverty line. And many times, some of these projects are happening in these communities that have, challenges that you can identify by looking up data in the uh, census tract data that identifies median household income for certain census tracts, right? And having that information is important. But again, creating the interests and opportunities and values that you want to address. I think you did that greatly with this as well, and really highlighting the values of safety for the community, right? So even looking at different interests again, outside of what you mentioned as far as safety, but also economic opportunity could be a really great example with what you brought up. So great example. Thank you so much for sharing, Chase. Um, let's go to May.
Yeah, for my studio, I said that like the conflict and issue was the concern with road safety because there's a big road next to the site and there's a lot of traffic that's prone to a lot of accidents. So for Batna, I said that um, it'd be implementing like lower speed limits, adding bicycle lanes, and possibly widening the walkways so that like the road is like mainly for pedestrian use and not for cars. And then for Watna, it would just be like staying the same or implementing more features that prioritizes the cars more than for pedestrian use. And for values, I said road safety and accessibility is like the most important thing. And for interest, I said that interest is to provide safer roads for a sense of safety for people who are walking past the site, and also to encourage people to walk more instead of driving to places, because the goal is to transform areas like LA into a more walkable city. Yeah.
These are really, really great examples. I like this in regards to the conflict you identified as far as traffic, as well as the opportunities that you identified as far as implementing lower speed limits. Um, when I'm thinking of Whatnot too, I want you all to think about this too, with like what your non-negotiables are. And this could be related to funding, right? There may be a funding component to your project that hasn't been fully realized, right? And you're like, well, if this doesn't get funded, this project is it's not possible, or it may be possible, like a challenge with stakeholder engagement, right? Like many of you have brought up, wanting to ensure that there's community engagement. So if that's an important component of your project, and we're talking about, community engagement practices, right? We've talked about different ways you can coordinate engagement with impacted community stakeholders. Um, you would want to, propose those things in your botnet. And let's say if it's not funded, or if the stakeholders decide not to move forward with any engagement, then there would be no point in moving forward with the project, or there would be apprehension, right, with moving forward with the project, because you don't feel like the project would be responsive enough to community insight or engagement, right? And so I want you to think about the project in that regard as well. And you all have been doing that, right, and giving some really great examples, but just really providing further context for what we're looking for in that regard. But yeah, no, you all are really using this tool very well, and I want you all to be mindful of that, right? When you're thinking of your projects moving forward, what are some of the conflicts that are showing up, and how can you position yourself as a designer in a way that allows you to be responsive to those conflicts strategically, right? And what you're proposing in regards to your design, and solutions, right, that are interventions in regards to what you're identifying as challenges as well. I'm going to go to the chat with Melissa's response. The Lao Center faces conflict, primarily funding to establish new transit routes and to connect existing roads, including the addition of a roundabout and a community enjoyment area. My best alternative to a negotiated agreement involves seeking financial support from the local public transportation company and waste management services, as well as applying for grants. This could provide sufficient funding, potentially allowing for buffer in the case of cost of overruns. Let's see. The worst alternative to a negotiated agreement would be if we could not get funding. Therefore, we could still publish ideas for future students to explore. The project's core value emphasize minimizing environmental harm while sustaining and regenerating land, people, and culture. Key stakeholders include current and future CPP students, faculty, local community members, local schools, and both transportation and waste management companies. See, exactly. That was unintentional, but I'm glad that you really provided an example there, Melissa, with um, funding, right? Funding being a major component of the WATNA, right? And really bringing that out. And so all of the examples that have been shared previously were really great. Just wanted you all to be thinking about funding as well. And so I'm glad that this example included that, because funding is a big component. A lot of times these ideas cannot come to fruition unless they're invested in. But do keep in mind that having a plan is super critical. Doing this work that you're learning in this course is super important in regards to understanding what the stakeholders' interests are and identifying how you can develop that in context of the project. But then again, making sure that when you're talking to, let's say, the developer or the funder, that they're able to see why you're prioritizing different components of your design, right? And so a lot of these tools that you're learning in this course help you learn language and approaches that allow you to be very effective in doing that, but doing it in a way that isn't rogue, but again, is in consideration of all the stakeholders that you're engaging, including the environment. All right, let's go to Patty. Are you ready to jump in there, Patty? Awesome. I see you dropped it in the chat. Conflict issue, San Gabriel River Basin. Botna, restoring the San Gabriel River Basin to have water flow in the basin again, bringing back ecology in habitat, creating space for community to gather. Wadna, it gets left as is, not really usable or much engagement from community with it. Values, creating a space where both community and ecology and wildlife share a space they can both use while benefiting one another. All right, thank you so much for responding in the chat. This is really a great example of it. Let's go to you, Maya. Did you get a chance to share it?
I didn't share yet, but I can share mine.
Awesome.
I also have the same studio as Izzy and Rebecca about the arthropod friendly gardens. And the conflict or issue I wrote about was that the homeowners might not agree with the requirements established on our criteria checklist, and they might not be able to certify their garden because of that, or they might not be even interested in pursuing it if the requirements are too strict. So my BATNA was that the homeowner agrees with all of our requirements in the checklist and that all the requirements are followed and the garden is certified. My WATNA was that the homeowner doesn't follow any of the requirements laid out. They don't certify their garden and they don't really care to make it arthropod friendly. I broke down my values and interests by different stakeholders. So the homeowners' values are having a beautiful garden and contributing to improved biodiversity of the area. Their interests are also interacting with the community and maybe growing their education on arthropod habitats. For our studio, our values are improving biodiversity in Pomona Valley, improving education on arthropods, and improving a sense of community in the valley. And our interests are developing a successful program for Clean and Green Pomona, which is our community partner. Clean and Green Pomona's values are implementing a successful program, improving biodiversity, improving plant and tree cover, increasing education on arthropods, and increasing habitat for arthropods. And their interests are implementing a successful habitat program in the community that increases habitat and also encourages community within the area. I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much for flagging that. But like I was saying, what I really like about yours, Maya, is how you identify interests and values based off of the stakeholder group. And that's really powerful because you really want to get to a point where you can align interests and values across stakeholder groups and really speak to where there's most alignment, right? So that's a really great way to frame this, right? And I want you all to get a takeaway from that where you really want to be thinking about these values and interests, not only from your perspective, which you do want to account for, you want to know what your BOTNA is, right? But you also want to know what the values and interests are across your stakeholder groups, because when you're trying to achieve your desired outcome, you want to be able to convey to each stakeholder groups how their interests are aligned to your interests, right? Or what you're trying to accomplish. And so that was a really great job, Maya. Thank you so much. Let's go to you, Abdul. You might be on mute, Abdul, or you might be preparing to respond in the chat. You can give a thumbs up if you're responding in the chat. All right, awesome. I'll wait for that. Manuel, did you get a chance to share yet?
I haven't, not yet.
All right. You want to jump in there real quick?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Um, I would say, like for our studio, we're working on this oil drill site. And it was like built in this like low income, like underserved community in like South LA. So I'd say like the conflict issue really is like the community and us, the designers, want to get like we want to make a good like sustainable like park area for them, but there's also a lot of requirements from the city. So I'd say our issue is getting that thing actually built and getting through those permitting and zoning requirements and like basically um dealing with like government officials like because they might want to have something else and other like real estate developers because they want to build like other less sustainable, like buildings and stuff. So I guess the BATNA would be that we get to build that park or we get to design that park and that park ends up getting built and the community gets that. Um, and we're able to design it, so they get all that. And then the WATNA would most likely be like we don't like we can't get through, right? You can't get through the permitting or whatever we need, or we don't get enough funding, and we're not able to do the project, and somebody else might do something, not something for the community. Um, so our values was basically yeah, like community-based design, um, where we can have like community center and things where like people who like haven't previously had places to have like recreation and green space. So since it's a place that doesn't have a lot of that, so one of our values was bringing that green space, that open space back to those areas. Another one would be part of it was again creating a community center, so that the neighborhood could get together and really make their voice heard more and be able to organize themselves better. And I'd say another one is just creating like a safer space because like the traffic in that area is like really bad. So just like an area where like kids can like play and be safe instead of playing in the streets. Um, kind of creating an area like that where like they can be safe and have all the fun they want. So that was another value. And those are pretty much the values that would be at stake if we don't if it wouldn't get done. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing. That was really good. I really like the components of yours as far as just addressing the yellow tape, right? No one can get around the permitting and zoning requirements, the ordinances and things of that nature. And so really understanding how your project is in compliance of those things and understanding how to ensure that the interests of your stakeholders are represented within that. There may be, like, let's say, design components that you were thinking of in your brainstorming, that community, let's say, was suggesting, but the site is not permitted for. And being able to understand what those constraints are and working through the transparency component, right? Ensuring that you're conveying that to, the impacted community stakeholders and letting them know up front, what those constraints are as they come up. Because again, um, in brainstorming, you're reaching for the stars, right? But once you start bringing that down to reality, and you start to check point for within the building, the Department of Building and Safety, for example, and you start to understand what the limitations are, you immediately want to go back with that insight to the stakeholders, and really understand what you can still bring in regards to your interests and values. And that's one of the reasons why your interests and values are there, right? Because when you're negotiating your BOTNA and WATNA, you want to account for those values. You want to account for those interests and say, well, we may not get our BOTNA, but we can still account for these values and interests, right? And the outcome and what we're trying to achieve as far as what the end result, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. Um, let's go to Jorge. But before I go to you, Jorge, I'm gonna read Abdul's in the chat. And then let's see who can get ready. Carla, do you want to go after Jorge? Let's go ahead and go Abdul. Conflict residents in the casinos gardens may have concerns about proposed design changes, fearing that the new developments could lead to increased gentrification, loss of affordable housing, or displacement. There might also be apprehension regarding how the design aligns with their day-to-day needs and how it reflects their cultural and community identity. The bottleneck in this case would be to establish a community advisory board where residents' representatives work closely with the designers to co-create the project. This could allow for high level of resident input and buy-in, helping address concerns directly and collaboratively. In cases of strong opposition, adjustments to the plan or concessions can be made to accommodate specific community requests. The WATNA will be proceeding without resident buy-in, leading to possible protests, boycotts, or even legal action that could delay or derail the project, right? That's really, really a great example. I really like the idea of having the community advisory group. That is a strong practice with a lot of projects and really support with achieving like equity and inclusion in the conversation and making sure that impacted community members are participating in that. And it really helps ensure that there's diversity within that makeup. You know, when you're talking about establishing a intentional uh, advisory group, right? So you can make sure that there's accountability in regards to different age groups and socioeconomic statuses, genders, make sure that it's diverse in regards to the makeup of the community. So all of those things can be considered, right? And that's going to be really important. And then let's say, like with your WATNA, that's a big part of your proposal and what you're trying to achieve. And let's say, you know, your class is participating in it, and that's a big part that your class wants to ensure the community partner is doing. And so at the end, they say, you know what, we're going to scrap the community component. That would be like, hey, you know what? Well, we can't lend our support to this effort without that component being a part of it, right? And so they would lose all of the resources that come with the partnership with the school, for example, if they decide to not proceed with the community engagement component. So this is a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I said Jorge, and then we'll go to Carla. You can either come off mute, Jorge, or are you going to respond in the chat?
Jorge Ramirez.
Uh, I'm
Oh,
looking
Jorge
at you,
Mon
Mateo. You can go, Mateo, Jorge, Mateo.
Okay. I'm sorry, Professor. I was driving home at the beginning of the class, and I wasn't able to hear at the beginning.
Okay, okay. Well, make sure you complete this activity for sure. I don't have time to explain it right now, but you can stay after class a little bit, and we can talk a little bit about it just so if you have any questions, you can complete it. Um, we'll go to you, Carla.
Absolutely.
Yes, so like Abdul, we have the same, I believe we're in the same studio. Um, so for um I have a slightly different project, so let me explain mine a little bit. For mine is that I expanded in the neighborhood of Watts and created a Watts um neighborhood urban trails that connects, well, basically it parallels onto the side of the metro line that cuts Watts in half and it connects to different open spaces, green spaces, and different services for the neighborhood. So my BATNA would be the community embraces the bike trail network system and funding allows for the project to be built and the city is on our side and the community is excited about it. And WATNA would be oh sorry, the conflict would be I forgot to jump over that. Um that a conflict that I have identified that the neighborhood may not the community may not be as supportive of the project because there'll be a lot less parking in the community. So a Batna would be the community would embrace it. A Watna would be the trail system becomes just one or two streets, but also make an impact to the community by providing safer alternative biking route to residents. Some values that I've identified are some environmental and ecological value by having a trail system, less carbon emission that we're doing because less cars and by adding more green spaces we attract more wildlife and also there's some community health value if we are walking more if the community is walking more and biking more um then the community will be a lot healthier and some socioeconomic values will be some for connecting residents to services and local businesses that they probably couldn't reach before. Um, some interest is to promote a healthy community lifestyle by modeling a walkable city or a bikeable city in the Watts neighborhood and increase green spaces and mobility.
Awesome, awesome. All really great examples, Carla. Thank you so much for sharing. Williams, did you have a chance to share yet?
Actually, can I share mine? Now that I hear a little bit of Carlos, we're actually in the same studio. Is it okay if I share mine?
Yeah, sure. Jump in there.
Well, basically, we're like Carla, we're both working on developing a project on the city of Woods. We had a field trip to see the neighborhood and some of the landmarks, right? And for my project, my narrative is developing a space for people from what's to slow down and focus on their mental health. It's basically an outdoor park with a small uh, clear building for mental health resources and the city of Watts. And this is going to be a park where I'm having different type of plants and trees. And I would say the main goal with this park is to help um people from Watts to slow down and walk through the park and get that um sense of peace that they deserve, right?
Mhm.
And some conflict and issue that we can find, it might be that the neighborhood is there's people working a lot and there's people working um a lot of hours, a lot of time, and maybe they might not find helpful taking some time during the day to slow down and just do nothing. Uh, I noticed that even after 5, 6 p.m. When I was in the neighborhood, there was still people working and there were still people like working on some construction. So maybe um, they might find this project necessary because their goal or their focus might be on something else, like making more money or uh, producing more for their household.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping in there and sharing.
Thank
Um,
you.
really appreciate that. Williams, did you get a chance to share?
No, I didn't.
All right, cool. Let's have you share real quick.
Yeah, so in my studio, we're working on the San Pedro fuel depot. So my group and I kind of focused on is pivoting to a more sustainable and eco-friendly energy source to power the site, since it's kind of toxic now, becoming a retail site. So we kind of just wanted to help the community around it in terms of like health and wellness because of it's such a contaminated site. So I guess the issue there would be like installing like we want to install a solar kind of grid there to power the entire retail site that they have planned. So the one would be like entering legal disputes and like delays due to like regulatory roadblocks that would prevent the project from progressing and would increase costs and delay the timeline. So it could disrupt the entire project in terms of financing. And then in terms of a botnet, well, let me just explain the Watna. So in this Watna scenario, it kind of like highlights this impact of providing alternative energy sources. Kind of highlights the importance and how it uh prevents for supporting a strong and more eco-friendly future for the community. And in terms of Botna, there's a way to like kind of engage in like researching federal or more state incentives to kind of for renewable energy. So it may override the local regulations and can, progress the project's timeline. And then also it would be able to provide a kind of like I would say like financial incentives also, because there's also like access to financial federal incentives for renewable energy sources. So it could lower the project's cost up front or like provide like certain credits or grants for this project. For the values, I would say it's more health and well-being and sustainability for like future generations, because it kind of touches also on the value of like economic justice, which would help reduce the cost of like providing energy for the retail space and in the landscape, but it would also kind of snowball effect towards the surrounding areas. Like if this project is a huge success, the local communities and the surrounding spaces can also kind of invest in a project of their own in installing these types of energy sources. And then the main interest would be just cost savings and reducing environmental impacts in terms of carbonation.
Yes, yes, I really like your examples of looking for funding opportunities through state and federal incentive programs. So those opportunities are definitely helpful, right? When you're thinking about long-term sustainability and maintenance of a site. How do you leverage funding opportunities by identifying how your project is aligned to some of those incentive programs? So that's a really, really great example. Thank you so much for sharing. Who has not had a chance to share yet? Raise your hand if you have not shared. Did we get everybody? Jamie, did you get a chance to share? Awesome. Jamie, do you want to go ahead and jump in there? Okay, great, great. Go ahead and type it in the chat. As soon as you do that, I'll go ahead and read it, and then we'll go on our little break, and then come back at 7:30. All right. So Jenny put in the chat for my studio. Our focus is surrounds the Jefferson drill site. That was a former oil drilling location being planned for redevelopment. However, the site faces environmental issues such as methane release from soil during the years of drilling, harmful potential vegetation, and redevelopment plans. There's also concerns about allocation of city services and funding for the area, as the site has historically been underserved. The Botna. The site has redeveloped with sustainable strategies that address the environmental issues that occur at the site. If the site refuses additional funding for regulatory support, the site could remain undeveloped and fenced off. This worst case scenario would not only mean lost opportunities for community improvement, but could also further entrench social inequities and resource allocation for West Adams area. Values at stake, developing the site in a way that addresses the environmental issues on the site due to oil drilling, giving residents access to green space that reflects equitable city investment and interest in creating a project that integrates environmental sustainability and community engagement. Yes, yes, yes. All this is good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that in the chat, Jamie. I'll go ahead and let you all go for a break, and then we'll come back at 7:30. Yeah. Thank you all so much for your participation in that part of the lecture. we should be making our way back. Show me your thumbs up if you are back with me. All right, awesome, awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into this next activity. Um, And this is really thinking of what we learned last week in regards to conflict management styles. And we want to think about how our approach to managing conflict affects our bhatna and our watna, right? So when we're thinking about the different conflict management styles we learned about, accommodate, avoid, collaborate, you have the competitive shark, and then you also have the compromising fox, right? So those conflict management styles are all options that are here. And so what I want you to do is think of your bhatna and your watna and how your approach to your to that conflict that we discussed would impact your bhatna and watna depending on your the conflict management style you choose. So we'll take about 15 minutes to respond to this, and then we'll have a few folks share out before we move on with the lecture. But again, let's see. You want to think of the different conflict management styles and how that will affect your bhatna and watna. Does anyone have any questions about this activity? Well, before we, move on, you all talked a lot about the different values, right? And so some of that is included in some of the questions that are here. When you're thinking of, uh, your botna, your watna, and what would bring you to the table or push you away from it, you're going to complete this conflict management worksheet, but think about what power are you gaining or losing with your preferred or alternative option. Do you trust the people, right? And when you think of trust, it's like, is the group inclusive? Are people treated fairly? And do you trust the process? Why or why not? Does it align to the social determinants of health principles? Does it model the theories of change, right? And so again, you all have identified different values that you all are thinking through in your project, so keep that in mind, but also be mindful of these here. But again, this activity is again thinking of how your approach to your conflict will shift the outcome of your bhatna and watna depending on how you approach it. So again, we'll take about 15 minutes and come back at 7:50. If there are no questions, I'll leave you to it. we need more time. Thumbs up if we need more time. Take about a couple of more minutes. Go ahead and wrap up your final thoughts. We'll come back in a couple of minutes. All right, all right. So we'll have one or two folks share for each section example in regards to the conflict management styles, and then we'll go ahead and move on with the lecture. Who wants to jump in for accommodate? How will that impact your botnet and whatnot? Who wants to share that?
I can go.
Awesome.
Um, I think at least for like in my case, like accommodate would like it would affect our BATNA, my BATNA probably a lot because like the whole reason is like designing to at least well accommodate one party, which is the local community. But then there's also in terms of our conflict with the people of like the government officials or like the other like other developers, things like that. So that kind of conflict, I feel like accommodating would be kind of damaging to the BATNA because we'd have to be ceding a lot of options and choices and things like that to them if we wanted to accommodate their needs over like the over the needs of the community, which we're already, trying to accommodate with our design. And for the Watna, um, I don't think there, I mean, I don't know if there'd be that much as an effect as much as it'd be on the Batna. Um, but the Wana, I guess it would be that just accommodating would more likely lead to that instead of the Batna. So I think that would be the effect that it would just be more it'd quickly devolve more to the Watna. So that would be its impact. It'd just be a faster way to reach that. Yeah, that would be
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that example. Let's go to avoid. Who wants to jump in there for avoid? How will the conflict management style of avoidance impact your botnet or whatnot? Go for it, Williams.
I think avoiding would probably be one of the worst ones that we can do in terms of our project. I would say that because it would cause a potential loss in project funding and in financial incentives. Uh, in terms of adding solar energy grids or like solar energy projects in general, they often depend on specific timelines for financing agreements and government incentives. So if we were to take up this style of avoidance, we would the project would probably be delayed too long, and then in turn it would be risking potential financial support.
That's a really good point. Many of these projects have strict timelines or are very dependent on funding windows. And so any type of avoidance will impact the timeline or create a situation where the funding won't be available. So that's a really great example, Williams. Thanks for sharing. Who wants to jump in for collaborate?
I can jump in for collaborate. So for collaborate with my project's issue, I think co-designing with the community is probably the best way of finding solution for their issue of not having parking.
Mhm.
It gives them a voice as well, the community. So the effect on the bat now would be great. Um, there'll be more solutions that can be achieved in both parties, I would say. So it'll affect more of the Batna than the Watna.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Carla. And then we have compromising Fox. Who wants to jump in for that?
I can share mine.
Awesome, Maya. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I was writing, compromising would be meaning that we would get the homeowners that are hosting the gardens to agree to some of the items on our criteria checklist, but maybe not all of them. And we'd be allowing for more flexibility in the habitat certification process. I said it would help us move closer to the BATNA, but not quite as much as we would through the collaboration method. But it definitely wouldn't put us on like the far end of our WAPNA.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that, Maya. Do we have anyone that responded to competitive shark? Any competitive sharks out there? Did anyone do one for competitive shark? I know it wasn't on the window, so you might have not done that, but thumbs up or hands up if you did. All right, well, that's okay. We can move on. Everyone's not feeling the competitive shark, which is okay. I think a lot of these projects um are in the spirit of collaboration, right, versus competition. I know last week one of you gave a great example of how some of these projects are bidded, go through the bidding process. And so there may be opportunities to, address competition in context of um you know, uh, bidding against your competition. But in regards to executing the product design, it's really a goal to be as collaborative as possible, especially as we learned in this course this semester, leveraging collective impact, right, as a theory of change to achieve our desired outcome. So, with that being said, we talked a little bit about this last week, so I won't go over that again. I want to move us towards this really great video, right? But we talked about identity incentive association last week, and we talked a little bit about what you have power over, who or what do you have power over, and what does it allow you to decide. Your power proximity, can your presence impact someone else's power outcomes, right? And power two, what parts of your perceived identity allow you to have access to more power than someone else in shared spaces? Does this change in different spaces, right? So those are some of the things that we talked about last week, and you really all did a great job participating in the activities that we facilitated last week in regards to identifying your conflict management style, as well as going through the identity incentive association exercise. Today, I want to go through this really awesome TED Talk with Heather McGee, and it talks about how racism has a cost for everyone. And, historically, the built environment was really non-inclusive, right? It was the domain of oftentimes heteronormative white men, right? And really creating a more inclusive environment has always been a work in progress. And when folks are resistant to that, it really is sometimes into their own disadvantage. In Heather's McGee's book, um, The Sum of Us is really a great example of that. And this TED Talk really describes her work and some of her approaches to achieving equity for all by addressing some of the historical harm caused by, folks that have a some all. I think I forgot the term. uh well, she'll talk a little bit about it. I think the phrase is skipping my mind, but there's this concept that she discusses where um folks think that if, say, for example, Black folks make progress, then it's somehow against their own progress as a group. And so she talks about that. The zero sum. Yes, zero sum is the concept. So some folks have this zero sum approach to um, you know, public resources, right? And there's some misconceptions on how that actually plays out for their group because of how they think of it from a zero sum perspective. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and check out this TED Talk, and then there's some discussing questions I want you all to think about in context of being a landscape architect and how these type of thought processes may can impact the design processes that's you all embark on at times. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So yes, I really, really like that TED Talk by Heather McGee. It really brilliantly describes some of the challenges that we're facing right now, as our nation is seemingly divided. We have to figure out where that alignment is, right? And this whole concept that we've been learning throughout this semester, I feel will lend to that as you all continue to address, the intersection of the public and private domain. Um, like she mentioned, Oak Park in Montgomery, Alabama. Um, like many places, right? A lot of stereotypes are described about Black folks not knowing how to swim, or there's always this concept of talking about Black folks and their relationship to water. But the hidden discussion is how policy has impacted the access Black folks have had to waterways, as well as water infrastructure like public pools. This here shows exactly what Heather McGee was describing. This on the left is Oak Park swimming pool, which was filled in Montgomery, Alabama, to prevent Black folks from being able to use it once segregation was ended, right? And so instead of being more inclusive and equitable with access to public domains, the decision was to close it for everyone. And this is a brilliant example of how racism and other practices of um, discrimination impact all of us. With that being said, a big way to address that again is really reflecting on that stakeholder engagement piece and leveraging some of the tools that we've been discussing, understanding the role policy has in regards to this, and really ensuring that there's some inclusive discussion making happening in the implementation of design strategies. We talked a lot about this semester, but before we go into more of that, I do want to go ahead and pull up some questions. Let's see. I'm gonna go here. Excel there. I'll put them here. Modules. So we have, can you all see my screen? So Heather McGee's video questions. These are available on the Canvas link, but they will be available on the screen. Shared environmental resources and equity. McGee, just respond to these questions. I'm gonna put them in the chat as well. But these questions are in response to Heather McGee's video. They're around shared environmental resources and equity, community investment in landscape design, inclusive design and accessibility, resilience in landscape architecture. So let's go ahead and get these questions answered real quick, and we'll come back at 8:35. It looks like we'll be able to do half and half. Let's see. All right, so you should have them in the chat, and they're also available through the Canvas link. Let me know if the Canvas link is giving y'all issues in accessing it, but you should be able to access it now. Let's see. And I'll have it up on the screen. All right, we should be writing up our final responses and getting ready to come back. Take about another minute to wrap up your responses. Thumbs up if you are back with me. Awesome, awesome. So we'll have a couple of people share out. We're coming up on the last 10 minutes of class, so we'll keep the responses brief. But if you all can take the ones that share about a minute to respond, a minute or less to respond to each question. I'm gonna just go ahead and do popcorn so that we can get through it pretty quickly. Carla, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Give me moments. Grab my responses. So for the first one, where how systemic racism impacts public resources. Sorry, it's like scrolling up. How might you apply this to community or public spaces? And highlights and exclusionary planning and under investment in certain areas. Some ways that landscape architects can ensure for equitable design public spaces are like I said earlier, community-centered design process. So collaborating with the community and getting them involved in the first place when designing will especially those historically marginalized groups and ensuring that their preferences are addressed will create that welcoming and useful spaces to everybody.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Um, let's go to you, Jorge. Can you respond to question number 2?
Jorge Ramirez or Jorge Montiel? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Is Jorge Ramirez on the call today? Yeah, I think you're the only Jorge here today, so
Oh,
well,
okay.
yeah, go ahead and jump in there for me.
It's the second one, right?
Correct.
Do you want me to read the question?
Um, no, you don't have to. You can just jump in with the answer.
Okay. I would say how the investment historical. Um, well, investing in historically um marginalized neighborhood can impact the well-being of of the city and region by having that mm, fair treatment for everyone, creating a better um a better I could say atmosphere
Okay.
and and also well, so some of the things we saw in the video, um the understanding that these places we use them, we all of us use them, right? All of these places,
Right.
and investing on this neighborhoods will impact by um even if you don't live on that neighborhood, you could use those spaces. Uh,
Hmm.
not you don't necessarily need to be there, and understanding that at some point of your life, you're it's gonna be either your commute or you're are going to need to travel and maybe go through that section of the city or that
Hmm.
section of the neighborhood. Um, and having that green space, those green spaces, that like renovated street, so your car cannot so you can drive comfortably anywhere you go, right? Even on this marginalized neighborhoods.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll have Rebecca go again. Rebecca, if you can keep your responses to under a minute, and then we'll end with Williams, and then we'll close the class out.
Hi, for which question do you want me to answer?
You can respond to question number 3.
Number 3. Okay, so I put to make sure to include the community in the design process to gain feedback and support, especially for public spaces, and that a space that reflects the needs and the culture of the community around it can provide placemaking. And by including the community in the process as a design partner, you can also give the community collective power that will enable them to take action and become more involved in choices and decisions in the future that impact their community.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And we'll close with you, Williams.
For number 4,
Yes.
uh, I'd say that equitable landscape architects enhance like community resilience to challenges like climate change by kind of focusing on inclusivity and accessibility, which fosters kind of an environment that kind of fosters a social and cohesive community. Uh, in terms of like thinking of examples, I didn't quite get to that. Yeah.
All right, all right. No, that is cool. Thank you all so much for your diligent participation today. Um, there was a opportunity for us to go over narrative development, but I want you all to do this for homework and make sure that it's submitted along with the responses to activities 1 and 2, as well as the video response questions. You want to think of what conflicts are identified, which you can reflect on your botany and whatnot activities for that, what stakeholders were identified. How do people of color or other species of flora and fauna experience systems differently? What are values, ideologies, policies that are supporting these experiences? So again, some of that's going to be reflective in your botany and whatnot activities, so you can't pull from that, but I do want you to identify these components because that's aligned to your Canvas narrative buildup, right? There's a series of questions in your narrative Canvas tool, and these are questions that are aligned to that. So you really want to, again, be accountable for these conflicts are identified, stakeholders that are identified, how people of color or different flora and fauna may be experiencing the systems differently, really, especially as it pertains to negative impacts. But with that said, next week we will not have class. It is Veterans Day, and so we will be out of class in honor of that. So shout out to all of you who are veterans or who have family who have served. But yes, we will be out of class next week on Monday, so no class. Definitely take advantage of that time to catch up on any assignments that you have not completed and get those in. I am still working through your midterm assignments, grading those and catching up with some other assignment grades. So again, take advantage of the opportunity to catch up with any assignments that are missing. With that said, again, thank y'all so much for joining today's class. I'll try to get this lecture up as soon as possible. I'll stick around for about 5 more minutes for anyone who has any questions. But again, always a pleasure to share space with y'all. Really enjoyed our time together today.
Hmm. Hello, Professor. Do you have a minute? After.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, I just wanted to say, um, hello.
Hey, how's
Uh,
it going?
um, I think well basically what I wanted to say it's I've been struggling with some personal issues in the last couple of weeks, months since the beginning of the semester. I know I've been submitting some of the work, but I'm still missing